Before he became the face of a global revolution, before his name echoed in the halls of justice and history books, Nelson Mandela was simply a young man with a growing fire in his heart. He had walked the path of a student, the path of a lawyer, and now he stood on the edge of something far greater. This is the story of how Mandela transformed pain into purpose, of how a man of law became a man of resistance. It's not just a biography, it's a blueprint. A guide to what happens when discipline meets injustice, and silence becomes no longer an option. If you've ever wondered when the quiet student becomes the roaring leader, you're about to find out. Mandela's early days as a lawyer were filled with idealism, but the streets of Johannesburg taught him reality. As a young black attorney, he partnered with Oliver Tambo to open South Africa's first black law firm. They didn't wear expensive suits or have polished floors. Their office was modest, their resources limited, but every case they took, every client they defended, was a silent act of rebellion. Eviction notices, unlawful arrests, police brutality. For the poor and oppressed, Mandela and Tambo wasn't just legal help, it was hope. And through this work, Mandela witnessed firsthand the cruelty of apartheid's machinery, not in theory, but in the tired eyes of mothers, the broken hands of workers, the silence of children too young to understand why they had less. He had studied the law to change it, but he soon realized the law was not designed to be changed. It was built as a weapon, not a shield. Courtrooms were not neutral. Judges were not just. Truth was not enough. Mandela's frustration grew. He was no longer satisfied with defending one case at a time. The system was too big, too deep. That's when something shifted inside him. He saw that legal arguments could not move the immovable, but organized resistance could. In 1944, alongside Walter Sisulu, Oliver Tambo, and Anton Lembede, Mandela helped form the African National Congress Youth League. Their vision was bold. While the older generation believed in petitions and quiet diplomacy, the Youth League wanted action. They called for mass mobilization, boycotts, civil disobedience, a total shift in the strategy of resistance. For the first time, Mandela stood not just as a lawyer in a suit, but as a voice in the crowd, a hand raised in protest. He was no longer pleading for justice, he was demanding it. One of the Youth League's first major moves was the Defiance Campaign of 1952. It was inspired by Gandhi's methods of peaceful resistance, fueled by the urgency of a people suffocating under unjust laws. Volunteers deliberately broke apartheid regulations, using whites-only entrances, refusing to carry passbooks, sitting on segregated benches, knowing they would be arrested. The message was clear. If the law is unjust, then to obey it is a crime. Over 8,000 people were arrested in just a few months, and Mandela, as the national volunteer-in-chief, was at the heart of it all. His leadership caught the eye of the apartheid government. He was arrested, banned from public gatherings, and labeled a dangerous agitator. But instead of silencing him, these punishments only amplified his resolve. Mandela began to realize that being a leader wasn't about popularity, it was about responsibility. He had to be calm when others were afraid, steady when others were angry, focused when others were confused. The more the system tried to crush him, the more he rose, like a mountain shaping itself under pressure. As Mandela's influence grew, so did the ANC's strategy. They began forging alliances with labor unions, churches, student groups, creating a broad coalition of resistance. Mandela also played a key role in drafting the Freedom Charter in 1955, a visionary document that laid out a democratic future for South Africa. It declared that the land belonged to all who lived in it, that all people, regardless of race, had the right to work, learn, speak, and vote. It was bold, dangerous, and revolutionary. The apartheid regime responded with force. Police raided homes, burned documents, and arrested over 150 leaders, including Mandela, in what became known as the treason trial. The trial lasted 5 years. 5 years of Mandela sitting in court, listening to accusations of sedition, of conspiracy, of trying to overthrow the government. But he never backed down. In fact, those years sharpened him. He studied his enemies. He mastered courtroom strategy. And more importantly, he mastered himself. He refused to be intimidated. He walked into court not as a victim, but as a warrior, dressed in traditional Xhosa attire at times to remind the world of his roots. And every word he spoke was measured, powerful, unforgettable. But perhaps Mandela's greatest lesson during these years wasn't political. It was personal. The resistance was costing him more than his freedom. His marriage to Evelyn Mays, his first wife, began to fall apart under the weight of the struggle. He was often away, organizing, traveling, imprisoned. His children barely saw him. Mandela knew the fight for justice came with a price, but that didn't make it easier to pay. His heart ached with every choice, and yet he kept going. Because for Mandela, justice wasn't a career, it was a calling. As government oppression intensified, Mandela began to shift his thinking. He realized that nonviolent protests, while morally powerful, was not being met with the same moral respect. The regime wasn't listening. It was killing, beating, silencing. And so, after years of commitment to peaceful methods, Mandela made a fateful choice to embrace a dual path. While the ANC continued public resistance, Mandela helped establish Umkhonto, the spear of the nation, a secret armed wing that would sabotage government infrastructure, never targeting human life, but disrupting the machinery of oppression. This was not a betrayal of peace, he argued. It was a necessary evolution. When the system makes your silence lethal, your voice must be thunder. Mandela went underground, traveled in disguise using the alias David Motsamai, organizing resistance across the country. The press called him the Black Pimpernel because of how he eluded capture, but he knew it couldn't last forever. In 1962, he was arrested once more, this time for leaving the country illegally and inciting workers to strike. He was sentenced to 5 years, but that was only the beginning. In prison, new charges were brought against him for sabotage and conspiracy. The government now sought to bury him for life. But in that moment, Mandela did something unexpected. At his trial in 1964, the now famous Rivonia trial, he stood before the court, looked his oppressors in the eyes, and delivered one of the most powerful speeches in human history. In it, he said, "I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I hope to live for and to see realized. But, if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." The courtroom fell silent. The world listened, and Mandela became more than a man. He became a movement. What do we learn from this road to resistance? That leadership is not born in comfort. It is born in conflict. That true courage is not loud. It is steady. It wakes early, shows up tired, chooses principle over popularity, and stands even when standing alone. Mandela's rise was not a rise in status. It was a rise in spirit. From lawyer to leader, he didn't change jobs. He changed generations. And so we close this chapter with an invitation to look at your own life. What are you resisting? What truth do you carry that demands a voice? Where are you being called to lead, not in title, but in action? In our next episode, Trial by Fire, the Rivonia case, and Mandela's message to the world. We will walk through the speech that shook the world. We'll explore how one man facing life imprisonment used his words to plant seeds of freedom across the globe. If this story moved you, don't stop here. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications. Because this journey is just beginning. And your voice, like Mandela's, might be the spark the world is waiting for. Stay strong, stay true, and never forget. Resistance is not rage, it is responsibility.